Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for coming to our homeschool information night this evening. And we have a panel here that will share their expertise in different areas so that it'll give you a well-rounded idea of what to anticipate or expect if you decide to homeschool. And I'm Linda Studer, and I'm a veteran homeschooler. I was what they consider now the pioneer back in the 80s. And that was before cell phones and before internet, so we used to stay at home and not go out until after the school bus went by. And then it was like, okay, now you can go outside. But it's progressed nicely over the years, and you don't have that. Now we have settlers or people who are fleeing the broken educational system. Or with the coronavirus, it's just throwing all kinds of things into havoc. So with further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, which will be Brenda. And I always never pronounce her name right, that's why I'm not giving her her whole name. So she'll introduce herself and give her background. Thank you.
Oh, I did it. Wow. Good evening. Is anyone here a little bit nervous about homeschooling and getting started? Yeah, I know I was whenever I first got started. I actually felt like I was jumping off of a cliff and taking my husband and all my kids down with me. And so I was really nervous about it. And what didn't help was I would get comments from friends and relatives, oh, you're gonna homeschool? And are you sure you can do that? And are you gonna make your children weird? Hey, well, no, I can assure you that you will not make your children weird. And yes, you can do this. Alrighty, I'm going to start where I think is the most important place, and that is the Bible. And if anyone wants to, you can turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 4. And it says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. Well, maybe you've read that verse a lot. If so, bear with me, and let's just do a little review. Review doesn't hurt, right? Okay, so teach what? Well, in this Bible passage, Moses is talking about, they're teaching about the laws of God. And today those are fulfilled in Christ. And who teaches, right? Well, here you don't see any trained experts listed. If you look at it, it's impress them on your children. So parents, grandparents, adopted parents, it's the parents. And you will notice that they didn't hire any experts. They didn't have to have them trained to teach. And throughout the day, and when you rise up, when you lie down, it's all day. And I guess that's why I chose to homeschool. I felt that this verse was the best thing, or was convicting me to stay at home with my children. And that's what I chose to do. I didn't think that I would be able to have a part-time job and homeschool at the same time, because for me, I get very focused. And I thought that it would just be too much division in my brain. And this is a little bit of a commitment. One resource that I want to mention before we go on is I got the Children's Bible in 365 stories. I wanted to hold it up and show everybody, but of course I forgot it. And I read this book every night before they went to bed. And I read it through 2 or 3 times, actually, in their whole childhood. And it was a really great overview for me of the Bible. Now, one thing I want to say about it, it was for 8 to 12-year-olds. I did a lot of reading with my children. And so they could handle something that was a little above grade level. However, the Bible is not a, how do I want to say it? It doesn't beat around the bush. You're not going to shelter your children if you address the issues that the Bible addresses. And this Bible story book was no exception. So if you use something like this, or use a Bible story book, make sure it's appropriate for your child's age level and what they can handle. I guess I also felt that homeschoolers are often accused of sheltering their children. And I wanted to, when my children were young, make sure that I talked to them about things before the world got a hold of them and talked to them about things, or other people who had crazy ideas. So I really felt it was a good resource and a good way to talk about certain things. I also had a book that I read just prior to their adolescence, and it was by Dr. James Dobson. And let's see, Preparing for Adolescence was the name of the book. And you may not agree with everything Dobson says, but it really did prepare them for adolescence. And it was really good to talk about those things ahead of time. I'd really like to encourage you to make Scripture and teaching the things of God a priority in your home school. All right. Now, as far as the public school system and individuals' needs, you are going to be able to do that so much better than the public school system. Make sure you study your child. You want to learn their best learning style. Do they quietly like to sit and do workbooks or color? Or are they really wiggly and have to be in constant motion? And how do you like to teach? How much time are you able to give to this? Are you going to want to have them on the computer, or are you going to want to have discussion and talk one-on-one with them a lot and have a lot of interaction? I'd like to say that kids around 8 years old or under, don't expect them to be independent. They really need you there. Okay? They're just too young to work independently very, very much. Even my teenagers, they needed checked throughout the day to make sure that they were still doing their lessons. And don't be afraid to readjust your curriculum choices. If it doesn't work, change. I was a park naturalist before I became a homeschooler. And so my teaching style was, I didn't want to have to use a textbook. I wanted to just have the outdoors because it was such a great teacher. I saw the kids' eyes just light up when they would discover something out there. And my son, whenever I first started out, he was very wiggly and always wanted to be doing something, and he didn't like writing. And that's true of a lot of young children, especially boys, okay? So we really did a lot of hands-on things at first. I did things, the unschooling method is probably what you would end up calling it. I didn't know what it was called at the time, but I found a book that had all kinds of activities, and it taught them how to count without a textbook, and what else? Oh, patterns. We would get large beads, and you could string them in patterns, all kinds of things like that. Or blindfold them and give them objects, and they had to describe them, which helped their language skills. So you can do that, but as time went on, I realized we needed more structure. For one thing, it really took a lot of time to pull all those things together. So I decided to move to more of a good books approach. And lastly, I didn't want to kill creativity, so that's one reason I didn't jump into a whole bunch of textbooks. I still kept it. I still kept a lot of hands-on things, but I just reduced it. I was going to ask you to go on ahead and just mention something. We were talking in the parking lot, Linda, and you said something about your daughter and her reaction to her peer groups and what happened before she and after she went to homeschooling. So could you make a comment there?
Sure. My oldest daughter, I had started homeschooling, and she was brought home for 5th and 6th grade. And before she was homeschooled, she was very peer dependent upon her peers for approval and for pretty much everything, which is typical of most school-age children in public schools. But what was interesting is after she went back in the 7th grade, and totally independent. She was not dependent on her peers for acceptance or anything. It amazed me how the difference just in those 2 years.
Right. I'm a yakky person, and it's time for me to quit yakking, and let's let Brandy take over here because she has lots to say.
Okay, my name's Brandy Martin. I homeschooled my 2 boys from start to finish. I didn't know what I was doing, I just knew I wanted to teach my children at home. So I started with an online school, K-12. But by the 3rd and 4th grade, I decided to go on my own, and I mostly use Switchstone Schoolhouse because I'm kind of lazy and it was already set up for me, very organized. There's tests and quizzes and games and all the subjects are put together. So the main thing I discovered, which is what Brenda also touched on, is that each child is different. They learn differently, and you have to approach them differently in teaching them. But no matter who you are, you learn more when it is made more interesting. So I tried to find videos, games, books, worksheets that pertain to what we were learning. I tried to use experiments anytime I could. And for my active boys, we used exercise balls as chairs, because they couldn't sit still. Okay, so the best part about homeschooling is your kids are always learning all throughout the day. So you can count many activities as school hours, making meals, chores, hobbies, reading, sports, music, art, their scouting groups or youth groups, activities, and field trips, name a few things. So I had each of my children take turns making meals or helping with meals. Chores teach them life skills, builds character, gives them a good work ethic. Hobbies can be fun and teach many skills. And if you can get your kids to read, that can be counted as well. My boys didn't like reading, so that was a little hard. And a lot of schools allow kids in their district to be on their sports teams. You just have to approach the school and talk to the principal. Also hikes, bike rides, fishing, other activities can be counted as physical education. Music lessons or music appreciation can be counted for music time. Some schools allow kids to join their bands. Creating art projects, painting, sculpting, working with paper, that can be counted as art hours, scouting groups, youth groups, and 4-H activities are educational as well. My favorite is field trips. We went on a lot of field trips. Zoos, science museums, history museums, Ohio Historical Society locations, state parks, and national parks. Most places have signs with information and interactive displays that are very educational. State parks and national parks have naturalist programs or junior ranger programs. So my family, we have been to about 60 national parks and I've gotten about 24 junior ranger badges. It was very interesting for my kids. They love the outdoors, so it was very interesting to them. We have also been to rock hounding and fossil collecting sites. Volunteering activities are also educational and can be counted as well. So also, if you don't like to be outdoors, there are educational websites you can find that have free interactive games and videos and worksheets that go with what you're learning. And you won't be able to make everything interesting, especially math. But if you can make it interesting, it will stick with them a lot more.
And the best thing about taking field trips when you homeschool is that you can go when no one else is there, that are in public schools, or you can take vacation. So the flexibility to go do those things when there's no people there and sometimes cheaper is a great benefit that I know we enjoy in our family. So I'm Leah Mendez, and I started homeschooling. This will be my 4th year homeschooling when my oldest son was going into kindergarten. And I'm probably, am I the only working mom that homeschools? So you can do it. You can work and homeschool. You have to be creative sometimes. You have to choose a curriculum that's going to work for your schedule. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Classical Conversations, which is what I joined, why I got into homeschooling a few years ago. We call it CC, Classical Conversations. It's a group that meets, there's one in Worcester that meets at a church, there's one in Ashland. They usually meet in churches, and they basically set up a school day where a group of kids come in. I think there's 60-some kids in the Worcester group. They're completely full this year, and there's a waiting list with everything going on with COVID. I believe there might be a couple spots in Ashland. But anyway, CC is designed to basically set up a school day, and when my oldest son was in preschool, I got to kind of peek in on that, and I really liked what I saw. The kids were doing a lot of hands-on activities, a lot of songs and hand motions, and I could see where they were using multisensory approaches to some really hard stuff. Like these kids were singing about the French Revolution and the presidents of the United States, and they were having fun, and so I was really, really impressed with that. So CC, for me, that I knew that I was going to be working at least part-time, was a great way that I could get them involved in a classroom with a base curriculum. It's not a complete curriculum at the elementary level, but a base curriculum that I could incorporate some of the fun things with. So I have loved that. It's what we continue to do. And there are, on the curriculum table, some magazines about it. But it really is a classical approach in that, different than public schools, because I used to teach in public schools, in that everything is kind of integrated. And so God is the center of what all the subjects are, so it's kind of the hub of the wheel, and then all the subjects are integrated from that. So we talk about science, we're talking about God's view of science, it goes back to biblical approaches. We talk about arts and the humanities, again, we're looking from a biblical lens. And that was what I really liked too about CC was, this is what I wanted my kids to learn, was in that way. Like I said, CC is full in Worcester. If you are at all interested, maybe at the end of this year, if you choose to homeschool and you would be interested in that, you can always visit at any time you want to arrange that to see. But there's also a lot of other great curriculums and great programs and co-ops that you're going to hear about. But that is what worked for me as a working mom, was that I really needed something structured so that I could kind of get it done, and it was still fun. So for me, it kind of hit everything that I wanted, that I could still work, I could get through everything, and my kids weren't hating it. They actually really, really enjoy it. And they were still getting that kind of classroom environment, which was a nice perk. The downside of CC is that compared to other approaches, it is a little costly. It's a tad expensive compared to other options. You can get completely free curriculum to much cheaper type of options, and it's not a complete curriculum, so you do need to purchase a couple other things or choose a couple other curriculums. But for us, it was the right choice, and even within our CC community, everybody does it a little bit differently on their own time at home, so there's still a lot of flexibility. So that's from a working mom that uses CC, and really, I love it. It's hard to kind of show what it is unless you would want to come see it. It's just very different. The classical approach is all about getting them at the elementary level to put those pegs of information kind of pounded in their brain through repetition. But like I said, they use multisensory approaches, so they can do hand motions, songs, chants, movements to kind of get it in there so that they can remember it. They can tell you all the 50 states and capitals, but in a fun way. So that information then, as they go up through middle school, becomes the dialectic stage, where they're starting to show more understanding of the knowledge they gained. And then into the high school years, it's called the rhetoric stage, where they're really synthesizing everything they've learned and now taking these concepts and they're writing a senior thesis, they're doing their own research project, they're involved in an actual mock trial and debates. So they are doing some really advanced work by the high school level. So it's kind of a long-term approach, but at the elementary level, it's definitely a fun thing just to check out, just to see what it is. But it is very different. About Ohio regulations, on the back table or on the shelf maybe by the kitchen, I printed out from the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which is really important if you're going to consider homeschooling to think about joining. It's a national organization that has all of every state regulation and provides legal defense in case you would ever need it as a homeschooler. And so there is a list of all the regulations. I'm just going to go through them briefly. In Ohio, children between the ages 6 and 18 are considered compulsory, a compulsory age for attendance, meaning the first day that school starts, which for Northwestern I believe is the 31st this year. So if your child is 6 before the first day of school, then they are required to go to school. So once they're at that compulsory age, then you need to notify the school district. So if they're 5, like my son is September 5th birthday, I don't need to notify for him because school's already started, even though he's kindergarten or kind of first grade. When you homeschool, you're not really sure what grade kids are in sometimes because they work through curriculums at different speeds. But you don't need to notify if they're 5 before the first day of school. If they are 6, they're 6 by the first day of school, sorry. They're 6 by the first day of school, then you need to notify. And on the Homeschooling Legal Defense website, and there's different forms, you have to fill out a form that's called a notice of intent, or you can write your own. But on that, you have to include your name and address, the child's name, address, and date of birth. And you have to kind of check off, it's not a complicated form at all, but you have to check off that you will be teaching these subjects of language, reading, spelling, writing, geography, history of the United States and Ohio, government, math, science, health, physical education, fine arts, music, first aid, safety, and fire prevention. You do not need to buy curriculums for all of those, especially for safety and first aid. Library books work great. Last year, I think, some local homeschoolers met at Worcester Fire Department at the station, and they did a demonstration for a morning and talked about fire safety, gave them all a hat, and they got to crawl through the trailer with the smoke. So a lot of places will just offer these things for you, and that's your fire prevention. Same with first aid and safety. If you're in a scouting group, or if you get some books and videos from the library, that counts. You don't need a full year of those things. You just need to touch base. You need to touch on it. And as far as the other subjects, you're going to want to look at what kind of curriculum is going to work for you. I'm not going to get into that too much, but there's different approaches to curriculum, and you might spend a lot of time on one subject because you need to, and another subject you might not need as much. So those 900 hours, like Brandy was saying, that can be having them cook with you, and you're teaching them to measure out certain things in recipes. That can be going on a nature walk outside. That can be teaching them, how to sharpen a knife. Things like that can fall under a lot. That's all considered instructional hours. So those 900 hours are really, really easy. When you homeschool, you're doing a lot of hands-on instruction, even when you're in the van or driving along, just doing your life, and they're with you. There's some instruction going on. So on the form, though, going back to the notice of intent, those are the subjects, those are the hours. You do have to provide and I have a sample up here if anyone would want to see it afterwards, an outline of your curriculum. This is probably the longest thing that you have to do. You just have to list the subjects. I know you can't see it from there, but it should be one page. Northwestern likes one page. One page of listing the subjects, what curriculum you're doing, and just a few bullet points of what you're covering. So I have my language arts down here, math, science, history, geography, and then for phys ed and the outdoor and safety things, I list what our activities are that we're covering those things. So it's just a one-page thing, but that's probably the most time-consuming thing. This form that you fill out is not more than 5 minutes to check off and sign, and then attach your curriculum with this, and you mail it to the superintendent. I would recommend if you do decide to homeschool and you're going through this paperwork and you mail it to the superintendent, that you send it certified so that you have a legal way to show that it was received. Because if you would send it in the mail and they would say they never got it and you never got permission to do that, you could be considered truant. So just a little bit of advice to send it certified so that you can show that it was received and signed for. And then within, I believe, 14 days? 14 days, the superintendent is required to send you back an excuse letter for attendance for the year. And so then you know you're good, and you keep that letter somewhere safe. So in case you'd ever be asked about it, you would have it.
I just want to mention, I got my children assessed. I'm not sure how, I assume they already assess at your school, but I had to go to a certified teacher, and she assesses the children, a sampling of the children's work all through the year. And then she signs a paper, and you have to include that with your form that you send in for the next year.
I just also wanted to say, those 900 hours, that might sound really scary to you. You are not required to keep track of those hours. They will not, come ask for proof that you spent that many hours. The first couple of years that I homeschooled, I kept track of every 15 minutes of time that we spent on anything, and I think we ended up with something like 1,800 hours. It was insane how much time. I never ever kept track after that because one, you don't have to, and two, it proved to myself that, oh yeah, we're actually getting a lot done, even though I feel like we're spending most of our day talking about putting your shoes back in the closet. Yeah, and the other thing is that that list of what you're going to be teaching that year, is that 6A or is that 7? The number 6A or 7 on that, on the form? You don't know? Okay, I think it's 7. Anyway, the list that she was talking about where you put in, what you're going to do for English and whatever, that is just for their information. It is not something that they look at and can say, you know what, we don't really think that what you've got planned here is good enough. They can't do that. That's just for their information. It's not a requirement in you have to tick off so many boxes in order for them to say, okay, we give you permission. You're not really asking for permission, you're just notifying them of your intent to homeschool. So don't stress over that.
And I'll say also about that, the first couple of times I notified, it stressed me out just to make that list because I'm not really good at sticking to lists. And so if I would pull it out, it was like, oh my goodness, I didn't get this done, or I did this instead. You have complete control over that. If you change your mind and you change completely different math curriculum, you go with something different, it's not working for your child, you don't have to notify them. At any time, you have the right to say, this isn't working for us, this is what we're going to do instead. And it's not a big deal.
sorry. The other thing is that some homeschoolers don't plan ahead what they're going to teach. For instance, the unschoolers or the passion-led homeschoolers, they don't plan ahead. So you can put that in there, say, you know, we don't plan ahead. This is what I think we might study. We might, you know, study birds for science this year because my kid's interested in birds. But you don't have to list a textbook for every single thing that you think that you might study.
Yeah, so it's really worded well in the notice of intent, meaning this is what I intend to do. It might change, and I'm just notifying you of my intentions, but legally, you have the right to homeschool. It's not asking for permission, and it's just what you intend to do. I think I've probably every year changed something on my outline of curriculum and done something different, but you just give them your intended outline of what you're going to do. And so just talking real quick about the assessments. So at the end of the year, like Brenda said, you do, if you notify this way, which there are some alternative ways, but we're covering, this is the main way of notifying the school district you're going to homeschool. You do have to do an assessment in Ohio. Some states you don't even have to notify. Ohio requires that you notify and that you have an assessment. There are a couple options. You can do a standardized achievement test, something online or paper and pencil. I believe you can also coordinate with the schools to do their testing. I don't know of too many people that do that though, because you're not using the same curriculum that they are. And most of the time it's probably really different. And so to use one of their standardized tests might not be a good idea of what they've actually learned under you. So you can do it through the schools. A lot of people that do standardized tests find their own standardized test and do it on their own, or they go through an assessor. Like Brenda was saying, they have a portfolio, and it doesn't have to be a big, case full of work. A few folders or workbooks that they've completed that you would have a licensed teacher look at and sign off and saying, yes, I can see that you clearly made progress this year. This looks like adequate progress. And this is just so that, you didn't take the year off and do nothing, which I don't know of anybody that has ever done that. If your kids are at home, you're going to be doing something, and you're going to, even the unschooling approach, they're learning something if you're offering some kind of direction with it. So those are the options for assessing. And when you turn in, like Brenda said, if you turn in your assessment with your next year's notice of intent to homeschool, if you decide to do that, then you kind of killed two birds with one stone by sending in your assessment and then next year's NOI. So there's a couple other things on this list, but those are the main things. And this is great from HSLDA, has all of the code numbers and the Ohio Revised Code, the Ohio Administrative Code. So they are really lawyers that work across the country to help people homeschool. And they are a great organization, a lot of great resources. I print out all these forms from them because they offer you the most legal protection. There are different ones that you could find on ODE, on Ohio Department of Education. Some school districts might have forms. You might find different forms. They're usually going to ask you for more information than you need to provide. And so these are the most legally correct forms probably that you'll find. You can also make your own as long as you're following the guidelines. So these regulations, I believe, are on the back ledge there. That's all I got. If anyone has any questions, about that now, so that you don't want to, forget something, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. But if there's any questions about regulations or getting started,
So once you send in your intent letter, can you start right away, or do you have to wait until you get their signed?
you can start whenever you want. I don't know that, at least me personally, where we really stop, because there's sometimes in the summer that it's like, we need a day of just reviewing something, so no, you don't need to wait. But you are supposed to get your intent letter in before the school starts. Legally, you're supposed to. A lot of people, will turn it in later. And from my experience, Northwestern's been a very easy district to work with, and very they'll be fine if you turn it in way early, or if it's a little bit late. I've never had any issues. You don't have to wait. Yeah.
You just said that, like, on the form, it's just like one basic sheet that you fill out, because when we homeschooled before, I literally turned in like everything we taught them, and I was so overwhelmed because I was like, well, what if I don't teach that? What if we ended up not using that? So it was very overwhelming to me. So it's literally just a basic.
Yeah, it's literally just, and you can come see it. So the way that my brain worked was subject that says required here, and title of whatever the base thing is that I'm using, and then like 3 or 4 bullet points. And that's just so I know that I've got every subject there, but I know people that do it differently, but really 1 page. That's what Northwestern likes and I think probably other school districts too. They don't want to read through everything, they just want to see that you've got a plan.
I've got something in the back too. I've got something in the back too. It's a sample in the back, and you can take a look at it as well.
My name's Aubrey Palmer, and this will be my 9th year homeschooling. And when I got started, it was never when my daughter was going to be going into kindergarten, I had never dreamt that I would homeschool. It was not until it came that time, and my family started asking, are you getting her to kindergarten screening? When's she going to start? And I just felt, I couldn't do it. And I kind of panicked because I was like, I'm not going to homeschool. And so I looked into different options, different schools, and kindergarten screening came and went, and I didn't take her. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm homeschooling. And so finding a curriculum probably is going to be your first step. I looked through so many until I found one that didn't give me anxiety every time I looked at it. And that was what I started with, and it was called Sunlight, and I still use some Sunlight. I have, over the years, let myself choose to add and subtract to that. In the beginning, I know I felt a little bit more like I had to check every box, and that can be really stressful. And so one of the things, and I don't even know how I got started with my first homeschool group, but I was thinking about that today. Who introduced me? How did I find out about it? Not sure, but I found a homeschool group. We had lived in a different county at the time, and my daughter was going into kindergarten, and I found this group. And all groups are going to look different, but the main thing is there's going to be support there, and I definitely needed that. The first group I was involved with would meet once a month, with kind of like in a gym, a church gym, and just have activities for kids. They could play, there were snacks, there were crafts. It was just like a once a month thing. And they also offered field trips and different things, different activities, but for the most part, it wasn't necessarily a co-op where we were teaching things. It was, but it was a chance to get together with other moms and let the kids play and to have that support. And it was really great. Then the year my daughter was going into first grade, we moved here, and I didn't have access to that group anymore, and I attempted slightly to look at other groups and just didn't find one and felt like, oh, I'll just go this alone, I'm okay. After a year or two, I felt like I was suffocating in aloneness, and so finding a group, if this is something that you plan to do more than 1 year, finding a group will be very beneficial to you. The group that I'm involved with is called Wayne County Christian Home Educators, WCCHE. When I got involved with them, it was different than the other group. We do a co-op where all the parents contribute and sign up to help lead a class. Not every parent leads a class, but they help in classes. We've offered art classes, science classes, all the way up through high school. We've had a mom teach how to dissect, and that was really great. We try to do something like that every 2 or 3 years so that each kid can get that opportunity if they want it. Just a lot of, we've done music classes, pretty much anything you can think of. We'll do classes about it, and then you can sign up and help. And we also have a lot of support for moms. Just a time where moms can discuss all the things that we're going through. Someone to help you when you're having anxiety or your child isn't reading. It's so beneficial to have another mom that's like-minded and is in this too that can offer advice. If you don't have a group, know a friend or something like that, someone like that that you can talk to is really, really beneficial. It made all the difference for me. It gives me a lot more confidence knowing that I'm not the only one that struggles. My kid isn't the only one that struggles. And it's okay to just quit if something's not working. You know, we all grow up with that idea of like, no, if you start something, you finish it. But it's not like that, because our kids all learn differently, and they all are going to need something different. Even with my 3 daughters, they don't all learn the same. One's more advanced in something than the other, and it doesn't matter their age. It's just the personality that God gave them and the gifts that He gave them. And I think with homeschooling, it gives you the opportunity to look at your child and really see how the Lord has gifted them. Every child has truly been gifted in a special way. And if you take the time to look at that and look for it, you will see it. And homeschool gives you a chance to really focus on that gift that they have, that you see in them, and go with it. If you have a child that loves something and has, like right now my girls have an extreme interest in dinosaurs, and so we're probably going to be studying dinosaurs a lot this year. Every kid in school studies dinosaurs, but we're going to do it while they're super interested in it. And so they're going to learn it and they're going to retain it so much more because they have such an excitement about it right now. And so it's just a really great opportunity. And so going back to a support group, it just really helps having other moms that have your back and can encourage you when you're down and remind you that they've been there and give you ways out of tough situations that can guide you through that. And so I would just want to encourage you to look into that. Again, my group that I'm part of is called WCCHE. And afterwards, if you'd like, I could give you our website so that you can, we have forms that you can request membership. We are a Christian group, and so we do have a statement of faith that we ask all of our members to be in agreement with. But it's really a great opportunity. And I know there are many other groups, like she said she's involved with Classical Conversations. And I know there are other groups out there. That's just the one I am in. And you can look into that, do some Google searches, and word of mouth, you'll maybe hear of other groups too and find one that will fit you.
And I was just thinking, as I was talking about staying in groups, you don't have to be completely severed from extracurriculars at the schools as well. So my boys are involved in the youth soccer programs. They also do, not in this district, but a scouting program, Christian scouting program in Holmes County. So you can still access things within the district or even at other districts. So you can, there's opportunities to not feel like an island and get support that way.
And my oldest daughter is actually involved with Northwestern. She's in the band. So there's those opportunities too.
Hi, I'm Renee Kunkel, and this packet of information is what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to go through it really quickly because I usually speak for about an hour on this, and you guys don't want to listen to that. So if you want to turn to the first page, where do we start? These are the things that we're going to go over really quickly. Setting homeschool goals, developing a curriculum map, plotting the 5 basic types of homeschooling, and choosing a curriculum. So if you switch to the next page, it's setting homeschool goals. There are 4 questions along one side, and if you flip to the following page, I've given you my homeschool goals, just a sample, just to give you an idea of what kinds of things you should be thinking about there. So the main question that you want to be thinking about is, what am I going to consider success at the end of the year and at the end of their schooling? What things are the most important to you? Some people's number 1 priority is academics. Some people's number 1 priority is Bible knowledge. Some people's number 1 priority is going to be relationships, and some people are going to look at trade skills. All of those things have a place in homeschooling, and only you can decide what is going to be your top priority, but that top priority is going to, it's going to influence every decision that you make. So it's important for you and your spouse and maybe your children to sit down and talk about those things and kind of get that clear before you go out and buy curriculum. Don't make the mistake of skipping over goal setting in your quest for filling out those boxes, because you're going to be really unhappy at the end of the year if what is most important to you is relationship building. If you go and you do, like a high academic, really strenuous program that doesn't leave you the time to focus on those things. Okay, so the next page just gives you a little bit of what our vision, what my family's vision is for our daily life, what we would constitute as success, and what our ultimate goals are for our kids in these 3 sections: relationships, practical skills, and academics. The next page is building a curriculum map. That one is blank. That is for you to fill out later. And if you flip to the following page, you'll see a sample one that I filled out for you. So you can kind of look through that as I'm talking, and if you have any questions, then when I get to the end, then we can go over that. So educational priorities. So these are things that you're going to want to think about in relation to those educational goals that you set. So do you want self-contained subjects, math, science, history, art? Do you want to, say, okay, it's math time, let's go focus on that. Do you want cross-curricular studies? How does one subject affect another one? Theme-based studies, learning all of the subjects in relation to a specific topic. For example, pioneers. So for geography, you would do where they went, history, why they went, literature, the story of who went, that kind of thing. That is a really popular one, especially for elementary school children, but you can use it throughout all of school. Chronological studies, there are a ton of options out there that go in 4-year cycles. So they usually do ancients, and then Middle Ages, and then reformers, revolutionaries, and then explorers and modern history. Spiral learning, little bits at a time, steadily getting harder and always reviewing. Some kids learn really well that way. That is the primary way that public schools teach. They do, every single year, they will teach science, and they'll review at the beginning of the year, add more information, constantly reviewing as the year goes on until they get to the end where they review the entire year, and then the next year they start over again with just a little bit deeper information. So it starts out very, very shallow and gets deeper as they get older. The other option is in-depth learning, which I'll tell you, this is what we do. We do in-depth learning. So, for instance, we spent an entire year learning about birds. That was, our science is entirely birds, the entire year. So I will tell you, my kids know everything there is to know about birds. Everything there is to know about birds. They learned bird calls and bird tracks, bird silhouettes. They learned all about flight and their internal organs, what they ate, where they lived, what colors they are, just everything that you can possibly think of. And by May, they were a little sick of birds, a little bit. I won't lie to you, but my daughters who are recently graduated, so I have one that just graduated this May and one that graduated 3 years ago, they just saw me pulling out these books tonight, and the bird book is in the back. And they were telling my 11-year-old, you've got to study birds this year. It is so much fun. Well, I'm telling you, they don't remember because it wasn't a whole lot of fun at the time. They complained a lot. But they were passionate about it for a good, 7 months out of the 9. So I figured that's a win. And if you're going to study in depth, you're probably not going to ever study birds again. I mean, it's just, unless you're like super, super into birds. I don't know, maybe Chad would study birds again. But so you have to understand that with that kind of learning, you're going to go deep, but you're going to have gaps. And that's something that a lot of new homeschoolers are really afraid of. They're really afraid that their children are going to miss out on something. And I want you to know they are. They are going to miss out on something. No matter what kind of education you choose for your children, you're not going to cover everything. You cannot cover everything. And you have to be okay with that. And that's the reason why you want to look at your goals and look at how, what you're going to be considering a success at the end of the year and at the end of their schooling, because there are going to be gaps. So let's not make the important things fall into the gap. Cyclical learning, I already talked about that. Interest-led learning. So that can happen with any kind of curriculum. You hit something that sparks interest in a child, and instead of pushing through it and moving on to the next thing, you just relax and stay there for a while and let them pursue that interest for a while. And that's a benefit to homeschooling. When we see passions in our kids, it's important that we don't just say, well, okay, but we're only spending 1 week on snakes. We can't keep going. Next week we have to move on to something else. It makes them feel valued when you put time and energy into things that they find interesting. And it's one of the most exciting parts about homeschooling, because you're going to learn things that you never even thought of before. And you're going to learn a lot about these little people that live with you, and they're amazing. They really are amazing, and so we don't want to squash that. Okay, structured learning, which is parent-led, traditional scope and sequence. Unstructured learning is child-led. Playtime, Socratic teaching, discipline. I'm not going to read all these because you guys can read. But you're going to need to look at these things and decide which ones are priorities for you and your family. If you turn to the next page, there's 5 basic types of homeschooling. just skip right over that page and move to the next one, where I put in all of those educational priorities for you. I put them into ovals, okay, for what kind of homeschooling uses those things. So let's just take one for instance. I'm gonna choose unit studies because it overlaps the most of other types of homeschooling. So it's interest-led, it's immersive, it finds links between subjects, in-depth learning, thematic units, project-based assessments, living books, and stresses art and music. And you can see that some of those things overlap other types of homeschooling, Charlotte Mason, unschooling, classical education. And so once you have a list of your educational priorities, you'll be able to kind of chart those here over top of the basic types of homeschooling and see what kind might fit you best. If you flip the next page, I put curricula, companies, and different options for each of those things. So school at home, that is going to be the least kind of jarring transition that you would have from if you're pulling your kids out of public school, because that's pretty much what they're used to. If they are not doing well in public school, or if they don't like it in public school, don't do that. Just because, you know, you don't have to school at home. You don't have to make a little schoolroom in your house and sit at the front and, you know, pass out papers and worksheets. You don't have to do that. That's not how most of us live. But if your kid loves school, loves worksheets, then do it. So there are different curricula for each of these. I have samples of some in the back. I have at least one sample for each of these kinds of homeschooling in the back, and I am happy to answer questions on pretty much everything except school at home because I've never used that. But I have used probably 80% of everything else that you see here. And that's because I just have a little ADD, I think. You know, I have 4 kids, so I like to try out different things, and they all learn differently, and I'm a little bit of a curriculum junkie. I just like to collect. So most of the time, if you ask me, hey, have you tried this? I'll be able to say yes. And if I haven't, there is a really great website, which I don't know if is on here, but you can write it down. It's called CathyDuffy.com. CathyDuffy.com. Kathy Duffy is a homeschool mom who has spent the past 15 years or so reviewing curriculum. She has a dream job. It's just like something that's close to my heart. So she reads through all of these curricula and then lets you know what kind of homeschooler would like it, what kind of learning style it has, how much time it's going to take parents, etc. Next page, Myers-Briggs types. If you don't already know your Myers-Briggs type, you might want to go online and check that out. There are 4 personality styles, 3 learning styles, and so there's a lot of different combinations there. So that's going to affect how you teach and how your children learn. The next couple of pages are 8 intelligence types. Linguistics intelligence, which is word smart, there's number smart, people smart, self smart, music smart, picture smart, nature smart, body smart. And that's a lot of different things. There are a handful of curricula that have made a point of trying to teach to every single one of those. My favorite of those curricula is Diana Waring's History Revealed, and I have a set back there that is, it's aimed at 5th through 12th grade. They say kindergarten through 12th grade, they lie. I'm sorry. sorry, but you know, the kindergartners through 5th graders or 4th grade are probably not going to get a whole lot out of it. But if you have a boatload of kids and you want to teach them all at one time, it is a really great choice. And I would normally talk about 10 minutes about that curriculum because it's so much fun. And you'll get so much out of it. And it is a repeating curriculum, so there are 4 time periods, and then you repeat them every 4 years. So you would run through it 3 times in 12 years if you homeschool the whole time. Okay, so the next couple pages, there's a blank page for you to fill out. And then there is a page where I filled it out, charting your curriculum. So now that you have all the information, you have your priorities, your goals, your learning types, the school type that you want, you know, all of those kinds of things, you plot it out. So for preschool through K, what I did is I started out at the end. And I said, okay, so these are the things that I want my kids to know by the time that they graduate. And then I filled it all in. So if you look back at the other pages, you'll see how that is. But I do have lots of samples of curriculum choices on that page. So that is the basics for that. Conferences is the other thing that I'm supposed to talk about. Conferences aren't happening this year, which really stinks. There are some online conferences that are okay. Great homeschooling conferences, they are doing one they started in April and it runs through the end of the year. And so you can go and listen to talks, seminars on everything under the sun. They are a Christian group, so you're gonna see that in most of their seminars. But they cover everything from getting started to what do you do if your kid just refuses to get out of bed in the morning, to, you know, why am I screaming all day? I mean, everything that you could want to know. And the other one that I want you to look at is teachthemdiligently.net. And they are a newer convention. They have 2 conventions here in Ohio. They run with CHIO, which is Christian Homeschoolers of Ohio, or Christian Home Educators of Ohio, that's what it is. And they also do a convention up at Kalahari every year, which is kind of fun. But I'll tell you that we went to that one time. We didn't get any swimming done, which, you know, like, what's the point if you don't get any swimming done? But conventions are a really great place to be refreshed. I am not a joiner, so I didn't do the homeschool group thing. It was just one too many pressure things, like one more thing that I had to be at every week, or that I felt like I had to be at, a commitment that I just didn't want to make. But that doesn't mean that I didn't get discouraged over the years. And, you know, less so the more you do it. I'm at 20 years this year, so I don't have the fears like I did when I first started. But I do have some sadness about it all coming to a close before too long. So just being able to get together with like-minded people is such a blessing. And to know that these people pray for you all year round, and you'll make some great friends, and they also have vendor halls. So, you know, if you look back at the tables that I have back there, that's just a teeny tiny little bit of what they have. There were probably 800 booths with different curriculum. The homeschool convention I go to down in Cincinnati, that's one of the greater homeschool conventions. And I mean that, like, that's the name of it. It's not that it's a greater, you know, like super great. I mean, it is great, but that's not what I meant. There were probably 5,000 homeschoolers there. And you just walk, they have these, like a balcony where you can just see the vendor hall. filled with other people that are doing the same thing that you're doing, and it helps you feel not alone. I mean, this is a small group, but even just this small group it's just great. If you look around, you see, you know, like, hey, I'm not in this on my own. So I highly recommend those, and if you have questions on curriculum choosing or any of those things, we're open for questions now. Yeah.
So I have one that is in the 14 to 17-year-old range, and I just signed her up for the online Academy on wait list. So I talked with the superintendent, he said just to fill out something that says she's being homeschooled so that I don't get in trouble. She is very like self-learned, like she'll do it, like last year she did it all through herself, I didn't have to, like I checked, but didn't really do anything. But I have two younger ones who you just have to, like I would yell at them the whole time. And I didn't know if there was something you could recommend for that style so that I'm not screaming at them the entire time.
Right. So remind me, the Ohio Connections Academy, do they use K-12? Is that the curriculum that they, no? No? Okay. Oh, is it? Okay. All right. Is that Ohio Virtual Academy? Is that the one that uses K-12? Okay. So you would want, are you asking for all three of them together or just for the younger two?
Just for the younger two. The older one I'm not.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about her. And remind me of the ages?
Sam will be 8 tomorrow, and Andrew is 10.
Okay. And hands-on learners, really busy?
Yeah, and Sam is doing Cheyenne's math homework.
Gotcha. Okay. So since there's a variety of skill levels there, I would recommend that you do the math separately. Are you having trouble with teaching anything in particular, or is it just more getting them to sit still long enough to actually like do stuff?
Getting them to sit still long enough. Andrew is still reading at the same level like Elizabeth is.
Right.
But he has an IEP, so that, I mean,
Right.
but it's just very much like, how do I get him to want to read or write or spell?
Right. So you're probably going to want to look at the body, the full body curriculum. So things like Timberdoodle, that is a really good one. It's just timberdoodle.com. They do a lot of hands-on activities. There are a lot of games. There are some worksheet things, but they are high interest. So that might help. That is a low amount of input that you would need to put in. If you want to put in a little more input, if you want to be involved a little bit more, something that they would probably like even better is Konos. It's K-O-N-O-S. And that is it's a unit study project. They have one called Konos in a Box, and they have two different ones. One's obedience and one is orderliness. And so like the obedience one is all about kings and horses and knights and things like that. And you're going to make a family crest. You're going to have a medieval feast. You know, the books that you're going to read are going to be high interest. Probably most are between like 3rd and 6th grade reading level. So I would have your older one read to your younger one. That usually helps a lot. But there's a lot of activities in that you can expand on. And that one is probably the most popular one that I have for boys like that. Does anybody else have one?
I can't think of the name of it, but I will message you Facebook. There is one, if I go back and try to find it, I almost considered it, it's adventure-based curriculum, so it's a lot of games and like mystery, like Sherlock Holmes, type of thing. So it's very game based for several subjects. You could pick any subject and choose this curriculum, but I cannot remember the name off the top of my head. But I'll message you. I've thought about I've got squirrely boys too. It's not like it's made for them.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, just one second. There's another one that is a Minecraft based one. I don't know if your kids are into Minecraft. Okay, well, right. Yeah, and there's a Lego one too.
I don't want to say a whole lot here, but I did Konos for about a year. It takes a lot of work. Just let me tell you, you've got to be ready. I spent the summer before gathering materials and putting everything in order, because there's a lot to choose from. And it's wonderful. It is, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, so there are two kinds of Konos curriculum. One is the binder kind. Is that the one that you use? Yeah, and that one has a lot of ideas, but there's a lot to sift through. Konos in a Box is open it and go. They have every craft that you're going to do. They gave you everything down to, like the little brads that you're going to use to make things spin. And I mean, everything comes in that box. And as I recall, it's a couple $100. And I might still have one of those in my house. So if you want to take a look at it, I'd be happy to loan it to you if I can find it. And
So open and go means it's ready for you and there's not a lot you need to prep, which was a key phrase for me in needing to work. And so if that's you, open and go is what you want to look for. Those are usually more expensive, or if you see something like in a box or something that comes pretty much, you can just open and go. Another thing too, Cassie, about reading, Logic of English is a fantastic program. It is open and go. It is great for struggling readers. Like my oldest really struggled at first until we switched to that. It is open and go and it's pricey, but he's now reading beyond grade level. So it works. It's more for the engineer type that views language as a mechanic with parts and pieces and sounds, and they really need much more structure to language than just whole words. So that is one, and I believe that they offer that now as an online teaching part so that it's not so teacher intensive. But open and go as opposed to, a binder or something that you're going to need to gather a lot of things will save time, but then the downside is the cost.
any other questions?
Yes,
I've been looking at that for my kindergarten and second graders,
okay,
and I'm trying to understand, like, you pick the history, Bible, literature part,
okay.
and then do you also need to add to that, like the science, language arts, computers, math?
Pretty much, yes. When I did it, when I started, you can just put in their grade and they'll tell you like this, these are all the things you need. But because what ages did you say?
Kindergarten and second.
You can actually do a lot of that together. Like, for instance, their history and all that can go together. Now, you're not going to expect the same out of your kindergartner as you will your second grader, but they can do a lot of that together. You're going to want a different math, and depending on science, they might be able to do the same science as well. They're just going to, so he might not, the kindergartner, you can't expect them to answer the questions the same as the older one, but he's going to learn right along. And that's something I noticed with my kids. With Sunlight, I started with my daughter when she was in kindergarten, and they're going to get a love for reading and listening to reading. You're gonna spend time reading to your kids if you choose this curriculum. There's a lot of reading. involved. And so you'll spend a lot of time reading to them. But now I have a daughter going into 8th grade, and it's amazing because when I don't feel like reading, I can give her the book, and it's a review for her while she reads to my youngest daughter. And actually my middle daughter now will also do that too with my 9-year-old. We'll read to her, so like for instance, I don't enjoy science, so I'm often having them read her science to her, or some of the history that I didn't enjoy as much, they're also reading that and getting a review. But my oldest and my middle daughter, they do history together. They're doing a little bit different in language arts, but a lot of those books, anything I'm reading, they're doing the same stuff. So.
And what did you pick from that?
Uh,
They have like their own 2 options and there's other stuff.
We started with, when I started, Horizons came with it. And kindergarten was okay, 1st grade was okay, but by 2nd or 3rd grade, my daughter just started to fight back on it. And she's not the type that fights back on really anything. She's a very compliant child, and she would just sit at the table and cry, and I just didn't get it. Like, what is the problem? And we spent a good 6-7 months just frustrated at each other. Every day with math, we got what I felt like was behind. And so finally, someone said, have you thought of trying something different with her? And that was when I was like, this is what it came with. But we now do Math UC, and I really like it. It really takes, with Horizons, it was a lot of skipping around. It would teach you probably spiral, like she's saying, like, here we're gonna learn about clocks, we're gonna learn about addition, we're gonna learn about this, we're gonna learn about that, and then, oh, let's spiral back. And it just felt like jumping around from thing to thing, and for her, it was overwhelming to her. Whereas Math UC, and that's all I've done with my youngest, it's takes the concept. I didn't do primer, so that's the very first one. So maybe your kindergartner would start with primer. But if you actually go to Math UC's site, they have a test that you can even do that'll help you assess which one your child is ready for. But for instance, the Alpha will focus on single-digit addition. What would be maybe a 1st grade level. It'll focus on that single-digit addition and subtraction and help them to master that. And they will add in other things. There's word problems, there's counting money and time, different things like that, but it's added in a gentle way where it's not like overwhelming. And then they kind of keep up with it. And then the next section, you're going to learn a multiple digit addition and subtraction, and then you'll master that, and then go into multiplication. And it's nice also that they say, hey, you don't have to make your kid do every page. If you get to this section of learning and your kid flies through the first couple pages, and they've got this, we can move on. If they struggle, there's enough pages that they can work on it longer. With my oldest daughter, who doesn't enjoy math, we spend more time on the worksheets than my middle daughter, who is able to mathematically just fly through those things. So that has worked for what's worked for us.
If you want to look at some other math options, if you're interested in the spiraling math, Saxon is the one that is closest to public school math. It's a spiraling math. Another one that you might like, especially for kids that need more visual input, is mathematical reasoning. It is full color pages, and it does jump around, but it jumps around in a logical fashion. So there'll be 3 pages of reasoning, and then there'll be 3 pages of of time, and you only do like 2 pages a day. So, you know, you're spending a little bit of time with it, and you'll come back to it if they have trouble. And there are extra pages in the back if they are struggling with a specific thing. And then my other very favorite doesn't start until 3rd grade, so it won't be for you, but it's teaching textbooks. It is an online math program. It's $30 a year. You have 12 months to do it, and somebody else is teaching your kid math. You don't have to, which was really great for us because I thought I was going to kill my son, and it saved his life. So that was a good thing. And if your kid gets a question wrong, it'll ask them if they'd like to try again, like if they happen to type in the wrong number. If they get it wrong twice, then they reteach it in a completely different way. So that if, you know, there's no point in reteaching it the same way time after time. If they're not getting it, they're not getting it. So they do it a different way. And then there are also extra questions at the end if they need more practice. So.
One thing I forgot to mention about MathUC is also you purchase a DVD as well, and so you're also not teaching it as much, and I love that. I love that I can tell them to put the DVD in and watch it, and it's going to teach them, and they watch it once a week, depending on how many pages they do that week. Each section, there's one video that they'll watch teaching that. And there have been times where I've said, go back and watch that video again, because I don't know the answer. Or, and so they do. They'll put the DVD back in and typically are able to then, oh, okay, I get that concept now. And so that's really nice for me, I'm not a math person either. And so to just be able to have them put that DVD in, and it's one less thing that I'm actually doing.
One more curriculum that you might want to look at, since you've got a kindergartner and a 2nd grader, is 5 in a Row. 5 in a Row is a really gentle curriculum, and I've got a couple samples back there of that one. It's great for kids up through 2nd grade. I wouldn't do it 3rd, 4th, 5th. They say you can do it through 5th grade. Again, they lie. It's too simple for that, but it's really wonderful for doing together. Also, Winter Promise is very similar to Sunlight, but without the massive amount of books. So if you get really tired reading out loud, Winter Promise is a good choice, although my kids loved Box Day. Sunlight is great. The UPS man becomes your kid's favorite person. They come with a giant box, and I'm serious, just full of books, and they're really good books, not textbooks. They're really good books. And I've got a sample of, I think I have 3rd grade American history back there, which would be a little old for your youngest, but your middle one could do it. But I would probably do world history, because you could do those together. Does anybody else have questions?
But how much time a day would you say that you focus on schooling? Or do you just kind of spread it out whenever you feel
So we do, right now, we do school from 9 o'clock until noon, and then the kids are able to do their passion projects in the afternoon. So like if they have reading to do, they can do that in the afternoon. I'd say 3 hours a day. Now, we do 4 days a week. We do 6 weeks on, 1 week off. So, because I just want breaks. I like breaks. So we go all year round, 6 weeks on, 1 week off. When I was doing photography almost full time, my days were full. And so we schooled on weekends, we schooled over vacation times, and we schooled in the evenings. And you have plenty of time, even if you're gone 9 hours a day. You have plenty of time to get it done, but I'll pass it over.
So I have a similar schedule with working. I think you do need to have some structure as far as like, they know that this is gonna be dedicated school time. And similar, using morning time, because then I go to work in the afternoons, that, you know, we have to get up, and we have to get started, and we usually get started about 8:30, 9 o'clock until lunchtime. And then if there's something, extra carrying over, reading time or math that needs to wait, then it just waits. Or if it has to carry over to a Saturday, then it goes to a Saturday. But typically that morning block of time is instructional time and work time, project time. That's where you're gonna get most of it done. And I know when you're just starting with homeschooling, oh, how can you do that all in 3 hours and they're at school for 6 or 7 hours? But it's totally different when you are a class of 2 or 3 as opposed to 20, 25. Having taught before, a lot of that instructional time that's dedicated to a subject is trying to help the ones that don't understand and trying to keep the ones that do understand from getting bored. And then there's a lot of transition time. And so a lot of the day at public or private school is really just trying to get everybody covered and everybody transition. It's just the volume that just comes down to numbers. The numbers of the kids require more time. You know, I have 2 boys, and so 3 hours is plenty. And for my youngest, you know, half of that. If we have an hour to an hour and a half for kindergarten, first grade, that's all you need. I mean, you're not going to get anything that you're pushing beyond that is not going to be retained anyways. A lot of play time is actually really good learning time for them. And then if you do something special, like this summer, we kind of took a break from math, and my husband kind of dedicated the summer to teaching them regular Spanish lessons. So you can take the summertime to do something special. I know some people at CC do the Bible Bee, which is really focused on scripture memorization for the summer. So if you don't get something done in the school year, then you can look at the summer months to maybe hit that more intensively too. But the good thing about homeschooling is, you know, you have time. And it doesn't have to be all day. It shouldn't be all day. And it doesn't have to be during any set hours either.
I'm just gonna bug my daughter, who's in the back there. Is he back here? Or? Oh, there he stands. Okay. All right. My daughter is Annie. Annie, will you just stand up and just kind of say hi or something?
Hi.
Okay. Did you want to make any comments about homeschooling in general?
Sure. So I was homeschooled. I did not turn into a college professor, but I also didn't turn into a weird hermit who can't get a job. So I have a job. I can pay my rent, and I still love to learn. And I think my favorite thing about being homeschooled was I was taught not just what to think, but how to think. And that was really cool because I feel like I became my own person before my friends did. And they were, school kids, through college and whatever. And I still might go to college. And then I feel like my least favorite thing about homeschooling is I didn't always know what was expected of me. So like, I don't know, so like there wasn't always you have to get this done by this time, and that was rough.
It was my unstructured kind of way of teaching things.
And it was good in a way because I could do, I could learn my art and I could study, historical figures that I admired more closely, and, I could go on my own a little bit in some ways, and I still do, learn things, and I get books at the library, and I love books and reading, and that's all I think I have to say, unless you have anything else.
Okay. Okay, thanks, honey.
My kids love her reading.
I was going to say, is there anyone else back there, homeschool dads? You, Steve, want to make any comments? I heard you say earlier that you really were for this, that you were really happy your kids homeschooled. So
I'll encourage homeschoolers all the way.
and Evan, you're way back there. I know you don't like to say a whole lot. Is there anything that you'd like to say? Okay, no. He's my farmer. So we live on a farm. And Annie is one of my first set of twins that I had. I had 2 sets of twins. So yes, you can do it if it's crazy. And yes, it's crazy when you have 2 sets of twins.
Yeah, you have a question back in the back?
I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about how to find support groups or how to find, like you said, like-minded people.
Okay, I actually heard about the group that I'm involved in, word of mouth, but if you do searches or even a Facebook type of throw it out there, I mean, I know my group, but honestly, I don't really know a lot of other groups. Most likely though, if you look up homeschooling groups in Wayne County, you're gonna come up with a list, or like I said, on Facebook, put it out there. You know, does anyone know of any groups? So that's kind of how I had a friend that mentioned the group to me, and I was at that point where I was desperate, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna apply, and so I just got plugged right in, and I do love our group right now. It's a great group of people to support each other, and we meet once a week and do a co-op style classes and whatever parents are willing to teach and whatnot, and just support for moms. We have times where we meet with other moms, coffee shops or whatnot.
Another good place to find homeschool groups is a library. I know that the Mansfield Library, the Ashland Library, and I'm sure that one of the Wayne County libraries have regular homeschool days. Another way that you can find homeschool groups is to show up somewhere with your kids in the middle of the day, and other homeschool moms will find you. So if you go ice skating or to the movies or to the library in the middle of the day when everybody else is supposed to be at school and you see other school-age kids there, it's a safe bet that they are homeschoolers and you can go ask them. So there's another couple of suggestions.
There's also, I just got, I think, an email or some kind of notice from Facebook, maybe it was, about different places do homeschool days. It was Roscoe Village, that's what it was, Roscoe Village Homeschool Days. And so that's usually in the middle of the week or a Friday during the day that they're inviting homeschoolers to come and, you know, when no one else is there. And it's usually, I think we did Roscoe Village a few years ago, and it's usually very affordable or even free. Homeschoolers are great at looking for free things to do. The Wilderness Center also does homeschool days. I'm trying to think. A lot of Sword Village also has homeschool days. And a Civil War Day was really interesting. There's a lot of organizations that do little things like that that will have homeschool days. My son wants to go down to Dayton to the U.S. Air Force Museum homeschool days with like all these engineering things, or the Great Lakes Science Center has homeschool days. So really you just kind of start Googling this stuff and then you start getting notices about it.
Any other questions?
No other questions? Okay. I do have curriculum in the back for everybody to look at. If you have any questions or you just want to take a look at something, I'll be back there to answer questions, and if I can wrangle some of the other moms that know the curriculum that I have back there. I've got Sunlight, I've got Winter Promise, I've got Classical Conversations, I have a wide variety of Apologia and some unschooling items and some unit studies. So I'm going to pass this back to Linda.
to thank everyone for coming this evening, and do check out the curriculum that Renee has up there and that Brenda has, and the HSLDA forms that Leah provided. And there's also refreshments for your dining pleasure. And thank you very much.